Trustee Dodge?
Here.
Trustee Calandrella?
Here.
Trustee Healy?
Here.
Trustee Katsinas? Here. Trustee Malani?
Here.
Mayor Peacock?
Here. Pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome, George. We'll start the budget hearing and we'll turn it over to you.
Mr. Mayor, board members, this is very exciting for me. This is I enjoy the budgeting and the finance aspects, and then just these 2 brief days that I've had the opportunity to work with the finance staff. They've been just phenomenal. So I'm going to turn it over to Anne Marie, who is going to give you a presentation here.
How much did you pay him to say that?
Early impressions. Hello. So last week, if you remember, we kind of presented to the board the overall proposed budget for 2019, and we went over it at a high level, both revenues and spending. And we said that this week would be the departments actually presenting their budgets themselves and giving you an overview of what's in the budget, what's different from the prior year. So we'll go through a number of departments. We're going to go through all the recreation-related departments, the museum, the Civic Center, and PIO, and then we're going to go over development services. And then after they present their budgets and you ask any questions that you have, we'll go over the discretionary request as well as the personnel request that were submitted by those departments. So Nancy, if you want to kind of get started.
Trustee Fenton has asked that we start with the museum. So we'll jump down to the History Museum.
Nancy, we can barely hear you.
I'm sorry. Page 103.
So the slides contain the page number that's in your book that budget appears on.
So as you can see before you, the museum has a total budget of $74,625. There is an uptick from the previous year. Some of those points are other services, and working with Sarah, who is our curator at the museum, she identified that there was a grant for approximately $15,000, which is indicating that increase, as you could see up there, to replace or repair hosted cabins. Along with that, you'll notice signs and instructor programs. The signs will be to add additional signage to the cabins, and the instructor programs, there's an increase. As you may have noticed, that the museum is gaining momentum. They're offering a lot more programs with much success. They're having more members sign up to be a member at the museum. So it's gaining legs and it's improving. So that's pretty much it for the museum.
Mr. Chairman?
Trustee Fenton.
In that $74,625,000, $15,000 is the grant money, correct?
So that's the expenditures of the museum for 2020. So the revenue has already come in, so that'll just fall into fund balance at the end of 19. We budgeted $5,000 in expenditures in 19, and we'll roll that over, and then the entire $15,000 that you already have as revenue will be spent in 2020 on the Hostler cabin rehab, if that all makes sense.
Which is included in that $74,000.
Yeah, the expense to do that work is included in that $74,000.
So actually, you could subtract $15,000
Not
from
the
the...
10 of it, because $5,000 was budgeted in 19 and will be rolled over to 2020 and added to the $10,000 that you can see on page 104 for a total of 15, and then it'll all be spent in 2020 on that restoration.
Once it's determined some issues that we have,
Yeah,
once that's taken care of.
But that's what it's budgeted for.
Correct. Okay, so we were having a discussion down here because there's some questions from the museum board and some members who have made donations, or individuals who have made donations. And they're not seeing where the foundation is separated from the museum, because one is a 501c3 and the other one is not. So if you'd like to explain that a little bit better, even though
I will
nobody's
try.
agreeing at this point.
Yeah, so the way that the village presents the museum is it's a fund. So we segregate it as a separate fund. It's a component unit fund on our books, and the foundation and the museum are together in that fund. When we prepare the annual financial statements and we do the audit of that fund at the end of the year, we present the funds that are related to the foundation as restricted funds in the audit. And Trustee Healy, you can probably chime in on this. So we report those as restricted funds. We also have to do a 990 every year that we file with the IRS, and we have to do the Illinois Attorney General 990 also. And those reports segregate those funds as restricted also. But for the financial reporting that we do according to GAAP and the GASB standards, it's presented as one fund on our books.
So if somebody who made a donation came in and requested to make sure that their donation was in the 501c3 and it was not sitting in the general fund of the Village of Orland Park, would you have that evidence to show them?
Yeah, we'd have the financial statements that showed those donations.
Okay, and then in the foundation money, all that money is earmarked for specific projects?
Yes, and it's restricted when I think we were looking at the financial statements a few minutes ago, it's restricted on the financial statements as well as on the reports that we file with the IRS and with the state. So we would know what came in that was related to specific purposes, a donation that came in, and we'd be able to tell them what it was spent on. But it's all within one fund on our books.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Trustee Dodge.
So, Maria, I'm looking at page 21. So I see 68 grand for marketing and promotion services. What does that cover?
So we're in the PIO department now, and leaving the museum.
We're
PIO,
talking about
sorry.
the museum right now, so we can hold that
I
off till
can answer,
later.
but,
All right, no, all right, I'll wait.
okay. So do we have anything else on the museum?
No, I just wanted to say Sarah's been doing a great job, and they just had an activity this past weekend. They had 49 individuals show up, and they're possibly going to repeat it because they've got people on a waiting list.
And Anne Marie, as we've talked about, it would be helpful in the future to note the revenues associated with the museum. It would be one of those. I know there's several different ones we talked about, but it'd be good to know what the revenues we're getting to offset the expenses.
Yeah, and you can partially see that, not completely, by looking at page 1 and 2 that shows you the budgeted revenues for 2020 and the budgeted expenditures for 2020. So you can somewhat see that, but not in the detail that I think you were looking for. Page 1 and 2, which shows all of our fund balance projections for the year. Am I looking at the wrong page? I'm looking at the wrong, nope, I'm looking at the wrong. Yeah, just page 1, I'm sorry, it's just on page 1. Okay. So you see that in total per fund, but you don't see the detail of it. But we will do that in the future.
Yeah, as we talked about, it'd be good to know. It's good information to have.
Yep.
Any other questions on the museum?
Mr. Chairman,
Trustee Calandrella.
I just want to know, are we going to be talking about, I see the museum has a position request that was not proposed by the village managers. Is this the appropriate time to talk about
As it was
this?
explained at the beginning, we're going to go through all of the discretionary requests at the end. So,
Thank you for the clarification.
Okay.
What do you want to do next?
So do we want to just move up to PIO or jump to rec? Whatever.
How about PIO, since it's on the same slide?
Same page. Okay.
Okay.
So with PIO, we have 2 items that we are working on. One, we're working on updating the village video, which is a promotional item that's outdated, which we'll talk about later. And also funding for the public relations consultant. At this time, you'll see a significant increase from 28 to 68,000. Basically, the purpose of the consultant is to utilize as needed with those incidents that are heightened, that need that special attention or that special urgency that we may not be able to provide in a situation that is critical, or to utilize reputation partners as far as looking forward into the future in a broader spectrum to hit a broader market.
Any questions?
Mayor Peacock?
Trustee Dodge?
So then if I'm looking at this right on page 22, the details there, 60 grand for the PR consultant?
Yes.
Shouldn't that be 48?
So, and we have a correction to make. So that is 60, that is what was requested in the PIO budget, but we also have on the discretionary list $48,000, which will be deleted. Those are actually duplicates. Michelle just told me that we just figured that out a couple
So
minutes
then
ago.
what's the number? Are we asking for 48 grand for a PR consultant or 60?
We're asking for 60. That is what the PIO put into their budget for fiscal year 2020. I don't know exactly what it's
I
for.
think we approved a $4,000 a month, so I think we should keep it at 48. My personal opinion.
All right, so if we don't, I guess just broadly, Mr. Mayor,
Trustee Dodge?
if that number doesn't need to be that high, how do you want to handle individual puts and takes and discussions of this? I don't think it needs to be 48 grand a year.
So
what comments do you want to make? We approved as a board $4,000 a month, so do we want to revisit that? I mean...
The majority of the board approved it, sure. I mean, I guess my question is...
So I guess the question that I would have to ask you is, are we going to talk about every single thing the board's already decided throughout this entire meeting? Or are we going to revisit everything that you happen to disagree with?
Yeah, that sounds like my preferred option, Mr. Mayor.
Well, feel free to take up our time. We can discuss it again.
Yeah, well, it'll increase our individual pay, Your Honor. So, that's an item I object to. Let's keep having the conversation.
Do you have a specific, or are you just throwing it out there generally?
I don't think it should be 48 grand a year. I don't think it should be more than 24 grand a year. I don't think we need a PR consultant, or not at this rate anyway.
Are there any other comments?
Mr. Chairman,
Trustee Fenton?
I just wonder, what has this person done for the village so far? Somebody, I don't know.
Staff want to answer that? Or
From my understanding, I know they've been used for a police incident that happened to pertain to
let's not talk about that.
the heroin.
Oh, that incident, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, yep. So we used them for that.
So I know that's on the docket.
We have two issues that the board's aware of now that we're using them for right now. Was there anything else, Tom, that we've used them for?
Yes. We used them to create a release of the capital report from the audit. We've also used them in regard to the issue with the Hope Church, with the homes.
So do they get paid by the project or just a flat fee every month, whether they do something or don't do something?
They bill by the time that they actually use. The bills have actually been less than their monthly for each of the first couple of months. Is that accurate?
Correct.
Any other comments?
Mr. Mayor?
Trustee Dodge?
In the same vein, so what, this also says marketing and promotional video?
Yes. So with that being said, the marketing and promotional video that the village currently has is dated. It's several years old. We wanted to update that. And that we had in discretionary, which I believe we'll talk about later, but we had budgeted $25,000 for that.
So we're talking about a different video than the one that we recently spent, correct?
To update it, the one that we have is a couple years old, at least 3 or 4 years old.
So the one that you came and we spoke about was, I think that's at least 5 years old because it predates me by several years, I believe. That's that one, and there was one other one, correct? We were doing two?
Yep.
And this, Mr. Chairman?
Trustee Calendro.
And this is, didn't we just do a video we used for Fox News? Don't we have that right? Is that, so this is?
We do.
So we're updating just that one and?
Well, we're not touching that one.
Okay, so this video, well, it's discretionary. Well, I guess we'll talk about it in discretionary funding. I just want to know,
Yeah.
I'll reserve the questions until we get to that.
Yeah, so let's save the discretionary items for the discretionary discussion.
I just have one question again, Mr. Mayor.
Trustee Fenton?
This is a question I had asked Anne Marie. It's on page 22, and it's under this public relations, this whole $60,000 thing, and then there's $7,500 for a graphic designer. Why are we duplicating that when we already have somebody in-house that does that?
The graphic designer is different. That's for the Orland Park Public. So Nabia could speak to that a little bit more, but that's a completely different project than producing a video.
But this says graphic designer, though.
Right. So, and Nabia can speak to it, but it's the graphic
For the public.
designer consultant that is hired to help us produce the public. So it's not the same as the graphic designer that I think is in recreation that actually works on our internal documents and all that for the entire
Right.
village. Yeah.
That's been, I believe, the way PIO has operated for several years. They've contracted a graphic designer to put together the public.
So per Mr. Mayor, is that 60,000 now 40,000, 48,000?
I think what the board approved previously was $4,000 per month, so until the board changes that, which the board hasn't, I would say that should stay at $48,000. I don't know if anyone on the board disagrees. We know that one person believes it should be half of that or not at all, but does anybody else disagree that it should be what the board approved? So I would say to keep that at the budgeted amount for what the board previously approved.
So change it to the 48? Is that what I'm hearing? So what we'll do is all these changes that are made on the last night, whether it's the night we approve the budget or we end up having another hearing at the end of October, beginning of November, we'll bring to the board all of the changes like this that we made to the proposed budget book that you guys have. So if we want to modify this, just, I guess, take an informal vote on it and we can just make that modification.
Okay. Anything else on PIO?
Mr. Chairman.
Trustee Dodge?
The other one.
Or Trustee Milani?
The other, okay. Yeah. Just a quick question. I see that it's $100. It's not the money isn't the issue, but the Dropbox Plus line item here, what do we use that for? Just to kind of align it with some of the work that David has been doing in information technology, we're looking at other options for that. So hopefully that a more secure option and a way that kind of fit in line with the technology that we're going to be implementing. So maybe we can look to eliminate that in the near future, just from a security and a IT point of view.
Any other questions on PIO? Next.
Okay, so we're going to jump forward to recreation. So you can see we start on page 74. The variances are fairly minor for recreation. A couple things we could touch on and then go through in more detail if you like. We have a modification of CPAC hours of operation. Keep in mind, this is very minor. When we have our back-to-school hours, we're opened on the weekend. So there's 6 weekends, or 6 Saturday and Sundays, where we're going to reduce the hours of operation by 1 hour. The reason being is that in late August, the sun starts setting a little bit earlier, and what we've noticed is that it's getting dimmer, and it's getting harder for our lifeguards in terms of safety and making sure that the pool is safe. So we had recommended that we close at 7 instead of 8. Again, it's not going to affect only but 6 Saturday and Sundays, and that was just something we identified as a minor savings. Also, we reduced some hours at Sportsplex Kids Room Attendant, and what that is, at Sportsplex, you have the opportunity to leave your kids in a daycare setting while you're working out. We identified a few small time frames where it's just not being utilized as much, so we decided to trim those hours. Again, it's not a lot, but it's something that we identified. Some success, and that was a very detailed topic last year, was the theater director position. We've outsourced that, and we've seen a lot of success by changing up the theater director from the musical to the summer theater to the winter theater production. So that's a positive change that we made. And then printing and stationery budget increases. As we talked about at committee this last committee meeting, paper costs have gone up since our last RFP that hit the streets. A lot of it is due to the tariffs that were increased with Canada and general paper production. The tariffs were removed, but the price point did not drop much. We did talk with the president of the Prairie, and he confirmed that that was the case, and he shared that information with us. So if we want to start on page 74, some of what I just talked to you about is covered there. That's where you see some of the changes. I'm not sure if you have any questions or anything to touch on with recreation, but...
Any questions on recreation?
Mr. Mayor?
Trustee Healy?
With the part-time going up by just a small amount, we're going to keep the same number of part-time employees, or does this reflect the higher, I mean, have you started to impact that minimum wage or any pay increases, or?
If you notice on page 87, with the pool, you'll see a significant increase in part-time employee from 657,000 to 722. That is due to the minimum wage increase. To answer your question, as we've talked about, it's going to be tricky handling that in the summer. The pool staff can't be minimized unless we reduce the hours or we shut down amenities of the pool. I have 160 guards that I need to employ to make sure that each pool or vessel is safely guarded. You know, it's a liability. So in that case, there's not a lot of room unless we make some major changes to the hours of operation or the options of the pool that are open or available to the public.
So more broadly, I think, on the minimum wage, I think obviously this impacts the pool greatly. It also is going to impact grounds. It's going to impact Public Works a little bit. So I think it's important that probably not as much of an impact this year, but going forward, it's going to be every year, and by the time we get to the end of the line, it's up to $2 million a year annually that it impacts. So we're going to have to think about doing business differently, potentially, in some cases, to see where we can keep those costs at bay. So it's just something that to be mindful of over the next year or two, to start looking at better ways, more efficient ways to do things with our minimum wage staff. And obviously, we can't impact safety in doing it, but there's other things that potentially can be done differently. Any other comments on this?
Mr. Chairman.
Trustee Calendro?
Nancy, we're still having the early morning swim, right, in the lazy river?
Yes, we are.
Okay. I know we had some complaints last year, so.
Yes, we did.
Thank you.
Yeah, we reinstated it last year, and we kept it in this year. So.
Yes, we did.
Thank you. Any other questions on rec? Okay.
Okay, so moving along to Taste of Orland. So you'll notice that, Taste of Orland was a success this year. We have a dashboard prepared. I don't know if we could jump to it if you'd like to see that. So on the dashboard, you'll notice that the actual expenses, we were at 191,000, and the actual revenues were at 250,000. So each year we've been creeping forward to minimize the subsidy. You'll notice that the additional sponsors in the actual revenue increased from 20,000 in 2018 to 81,000. And the sponsorship, of course, 2018 and 2019 is similar, with Payless Loyola being our naming rights sponsor. One of the impacts in that additional sponsorship was the waste management sponsorship. 50,000 was moved to the Taste, which doesn't mean that will happen again this year, but this current year, that was moved there to help subsidize the Taste of Orland. Let's see, another thing that's just generally positively impacting our special events, to kind of segue into that, is our volunteerism. This year to date, we've had 330 volunteers, and we still have a quarter to go. That impacts us by a total number of 344 hours, and that's to date $34,000 in man hours if we were to hire these people and they were working for us. Last year, just to give you a reference, in 2018, our total savings by utilizing volunteers was $51,000 in volunteers. So that's a savings to Taste, to special events in general. What else? Any questions?
While we have this open, are there any questions on any of the other special events? You're done with, you're kind of done
Mayor
with.
Pico.
We're gonna
With
jump into
Taste, is
special
there any
events, so
questions with
just-
Trustee Dodge?
Just not a particular comment about the numbers, other than, Nancy, I think you summarized it well. The sponsorships help make this event look as if it's in the black, so to speak, in terms of the revenue and costs, and we can take it up as we go forward. You know, I think we're doing this idea, Taste of Orland, has matured, and it's matured nicely. So it'd be great if we continue to refine the business model so that, I don't want to say it's more self-sustaining. I don't mind if it's, quite frankly, plus or minus a little bit in either direction, because it's a community event. And so I like the changes that we've adapted over time. I just want to make sure that we do everything we can. Because every time we talk to a vendor, they tell you how challenging it is to be there. They love being there, but it's challenging operationally, right? So just we'll take it up in the future, but I'm glad we're getting to this place where it's a healthy and a sustainable event, but I want to make sure we keep thinking about it.
To piggyback on that, we have already reached out to our headlining sponsors and our main sponsors, Payless Loyola, Mazda, Christopher Burke, Horton. We're sending our emails out and following up to set up meetings to start talking about 2020 and securing those sponsorships for this upcoming year.
Thank you.
And what, to your point, yeah, let's go ahead, if you want to show the other special event.
Yeah, we have all of the, we have a dashboard like this for each of the special events that Nancy's staff prepares, so if there's any other ones you would like to see and kind of see the
Well,
detail.
it'd be good to run through them and see where we're at.
We can do that.
Because I know we made an emphasis to track this so we can see how we're doing on it to
Yes.
help our decision-making, so let's take a look at it and see what it
It's
is.
going to go in the order that they're.
That's
in the
fine.
Okay.
So, as you know, we had our Loverboy ticketed concert event, our first ticketed concert event this past August. We're very proud of the event. You know, we had literally from, I think it was 100 days for us to prepare. We announced on June 11th for this event. So we sold, you could see, 1,769 tickets. So again, within 3 months to sell that many tickets is pretty exciting.
60 days.
Yes, thank you. I'm selling myself short there. Also, you know, we also started some corporate sponsorship tents. Those were well received, and we feel, looking ahead in the future, that that's only going to take off even more. So again, we were under in our expenses. We were budgeted to spend 171, and we came in under at 158. And although we didn't meet our budgeted revenue, I think if given a year to prepare and plan for this event, it would have been a different story. I think we would have sold quadruple the amount of tickets. Again, having a short amount of time, I think it was a success.
I noticed we only sold 12, we only had 12 buyers outside of Orland Park, which obviously that's one of our goals, but with 60 days, we had very little time to do that.
You know, we had our demographic and marketing, we definitely focused on hitting outside. We hit the reader, we hit the radio stations, we had video. We were on Pandora. I think what you're looking at is they had the option to click on that, so we may not be actually demonstrating the volume of non-residents that participated, because if they just clicked resident, they're going to show up as a resident. We used an outside website for, I think it was Universe. So Uverse is the vendor that we use to register, so we have to look at that for next year and how to capture that a little bit better, but for putting it together pretty quickly, that's what it's saying, but I don't know how accurate that is.
Understood. I know that we learned a lot in the very short time and by putting it on, but I think that would be one thing that would be very good to capture because it would help you for marketing in the future.
Mayor Pico?
Trustee Dodge.
So you don't never want to see numbers like this, but we all went into this, I think, eyes wide open, that it was the first one that we were doing. So to your point, I think we all learned a lot. We'll continue to refine the model, and I guess at some point we're going to have to get pretty serious about the business model in terms of the entertainment, the probability of selling a lot of tickets with the entertainment. In the Wayback Machine, we had talked about potentially just outsourcing programming of this altogether once we kind of grew this. So there's a lot to discuss. Glad we got started. Not crazy about, the numbers. It is what it is, but we knew coming in, we were making an investment to get it started, and let's see where this goes.
And I think at the end of the day, the people that were there had a great time. I mean, we had great weather, people enjoyed themselves, so to your point, I think we're onto something. There's a lot of opportunity for us to capitalize there and grow that event.
And what would be your goal? Your goal would be to approve the acts for next year by the end of the year, correct?
Yes.
And then kind of announce them and reveal them.
Yep.
And I know we've talked about this a little bit about if you have more than one, you have some ticket packaging options, which, give you ability to discount if you buy 2 or buy 3, which can potentially sell a lot more tickets across the board, especially if you're getting a 8-month head start on it.
Yeah, Mayor Pico.
Trustee Dodge.
Much like with Taste of Orland, if I had my druthers, right, it took Ravinia 100 years to get to what it is currently, right? So it's going to take us a while. And if I had my druthers on these special events, you get to a place where the totality of what we spend on these big events in Orland over the course of the year is plus or minus a little bit, right? We were learning. I just want to make it clear that I think that this is an important thing for Orland going forward, bringing people to Orland Park, making the town more enjoyable for a lot of reasons, quality of life, all those things we've talked about. So I don't know if we're ever going to be perfect here, where it's going to make money per se. And I just want to put it on the table that making money is not my objective for these things. It's to support the community because there's benefits that show up in Orland that aren't captured in these numbers and never will be.
And I think it's important to note, because I think everyone here would agree the Taste is a phenomenal event. I think everybody here enjoys it. If you go back, the Taste was subsidized anywhere, up until 2017, was that subsidized anywhere between 54 and 100 grand a year.
Big number.
And it's really when we, a couple years ago, had the budget issues we've had, and we really put a focus on sponsorships that we didn't do before, that we really been able to drive sponsorships there. And granted, we applied those sponsorships that we didn't necessarily have to, but we applied them all to the Taste, to what Trustee Dodge pointed out earlier, and it showed a $58,000 positive. So, the goal here is if you start to see, much more attendance to this, hopefully we can drive even more sponsorship towards this event. And so I agree, it doesn't have to be break even, but we like to do it, we like to be as effective.
As break even as possible,
as effective with the money as we possibly can. And I think we've identified that the Taste is a great event, and I think this will be too once it's given a couple of years to have its legs.
Earn its momentum.
Mr. Chairman,
Trustee Fenton.
has staff looked into outsourcing this event?
No, we have not.
Is that something that should be looked at?
I think that, sure, we could investigate that. However, we've put in a lot of sweat equity on this event, in this
I'm not
past
talking
summer.
about the Taste. I'm
Yeah,
talking about the
of course.
concert.
I got you. We've learned a lot, and I would hate to pay somebody to do something that we could do ourselves.
Well, no, it wouldn't cost us anything.
I don't know. We'll get there.
I don't think we're there yet with that someone's going to just step in and do this at this point. I mean, if we could find someone that would do that, I just don't, I don't think that's a realistic expectation at this juncture.
Just a thought.
Mr. Chairman, I think that, as we kind of go through this with the committee, and obviously full board will have an opinion, I think there's parts of this that we can lean on the external professional market to help us with, but there's some pieces I don't think operationally we'd ever want to let go of in terms of control.
Which we did that this year with this event. We had a contracted service who handled the band, what they needed, all the details. We did not handle anything with the bands. We had a service who did that. We handled the front-end operation. We handled the setup, the details of the event site. But we did contract out the actual handling of the bands and making sure they were there on time, picked up at their hotels, whatever they needed.
In my understanding, Nancy, just correct me if I'm wrong, for everyone's edification, we outsource the stuff that we don't know how to do, that we're not proficient at, but we kept all of the stuff that we are proficient at, like as you said, the layout, the setup, the security, the crowd control issues, all of those things that we felt like we were pretty competent at.
Yes.
Okay.
Bring it to the committee.
Can we see some of the other events too?
Sure. Market at the Park. So some of these are year-to-date. They're not finalized, but you'll see if you were at the Market at the Park this summer, which I know a lot of you were, it was a huge hit since we moved it from Village Green to Crescent Park. It's done nothing but grow and prosper. You'll see our, our sales, our sponsorships, and our actuals. We came in ahead $14,208. Let me see at the top here. So we were budgeted for $23,000 in revenue, and we came in at 26, and we were budgeted to spend 12, and we came in under at 11,995. Great event. People enjoy it. The community is really gravitating toward the evening time frame, and it's a success.
It's a great location. We're going to have to be mindful of the construction that could be going on over the next 3 or 4 years there, and trying to have a game plan. I don't think it's going to be there next year by the time this kicks off, would be my guess. But I think you're going to have to be prepared for the years after that to maybe have some alternative options. So you may want to start thinking about that now.
Yep, we have. Okay. 2019 Brewfest. So again, another success. As you know, craft beer is growing in popularity. People really appreciate it. We have a local expert in Orland Park who came out, and he was there day of sight, assisting and helping. You could see the budgeted revenue was $25,000. We came in at $35,000. We had Mazda was the main headline sponsor for that event, and our expenses were budgeted at $34,000, and we came in under at $29,000. So you could see our our net was $5,000. Again, it was a great event. We hit another demographic that we typically don't hit. I think it's a similar demographic to Market at the Park, but that 30, 40, 50-year-old demo was just present on site and had a great time.
Mr. Chairman?
Trustee Dodge.
So, again, these things are important for the community, right? The livability of Orland, so that's good. But as we go forward on this one, I just want us to be ever mindful, like in this case, just doing some simple math, but for the sponsor, it would not have been a profitable event, so to speak. So the only reason for bringing it up is not to say anything about the sponsors. They have a business reason for doing it. Let's give them a good reason to put their brand and their logo in front of this many people. Got all that. But I just want to make sure we continuously put pressure on ourselves to tune the business model so that if we do have a run of not getting as much sponsor or as many sponsors at the same rate, we're still going to be able to sustain the events. That's my argument across all these things. Well, you know this.
Yes.
Right. And I think the other thing that's important to note, yes, sponsorships for taste and for this, but I think it shows when you're having a great event that sponsors they feel like they're getting a return. Sponsors don't like putting money out just to put money out because we've asked, because it feels uncomfortable. But if we can actually provide something that they can get their brand in front of the people they want to get it in front of, they're more than happy to sponsor. So I think that's critical for this. It's going to be critical for the concerts. And so I think it was another job well done. But Trustee Dodge's point's very accurate, that we need to keep always focused on the, absent the sponsorships, how are we doing in controlling expenses? And I know that you do. I mean, the concert was a perfect example. The Jefferson Starship Loverboy concert, you came in $14,000 under, I believe, and when you saw that the ticket sales were a little bit lower, you scaled a lot of stuff back. So
Right.
I know you're mindful of that, but we should continue to be.
And that's critical for us to be able to make those audibles and move when we need to move, to cut where we can cut. Okay, Winter Wonderland Ice Rink. Again, similar to the pool, we had some polar vortex weather last year where schools were shut down and it was dangerous to be outside. So you're going to notice that we have an actual loss of $9,000 here. Again, it's dependent on the weather. We did make some changes last year. I'm sorry, I have to try and squint to read this. You could see our revenues, wait a minute. Our revenues were at 75 and the actual we brought in was 12. Our expenses were at 21 and our actual expenses were at 21. This one I think is a little unique because it hits 2 seasons, so it covers over, so 19, I still have 19 to hit in November, December, so it's not completely complete, if you will, because the ice rink hasn't opened up for the season yet.
Well,
And we had a mechanical failure. Thank you, Gary.
And I guess my thought on this is not a special event as much as it is an ongoing thing that we have. We have an ice skating rink and we operate it every year. And I know we look to, we look to subsidize our Parks and Rec programs, and this seems to fall, within that range. And it's just something that we offer to our community. It's not really a special event because it's there all winter long.
And you'll notice that we made some increases last year in skate rentals. We also made some cuts last year by reducing our hours of operation. We eliminated some weekend bonfires. So we've cut some corners on the ice rink to scale back a little bit.
And it's heavily weather dependent.
Yep. Okay, the Great Pumpkin Party, again, it's fresh off 2 weeks ago. Some challenges this year is we had that record rainfall the day it was supposed to be scheduled and everything was flooded. So we did have to make the decision to cancel to the rain date, which was advertised from the beginning. So we didn't have to do a lot of recon on that. It was out there. But you'll see again, the revenue was 13, which was budgeted. We came in slightly under at 12 and our expenses were at 12 and the actual was at 8. So that brought us to a net of a positive 3,000, a little bit over in 3,000. So it was a great event. It was just rerouted to the next weekend.
Could we, for the future, for all of these events, just put approximate attendance at the bottom so we know? There's a big difference between losing, say, 25 grand or 50 grand at the Taste where 50,000 people are there and losing 25 grand that only 200 people participate. So I think we know that this is a very high numbers and it's break even, so it's great.
Mayor Pico, should we have a new metric, happiness per populace or, per attendee?
It has 1,100, we estimated around 1,100 that were at the event.
Yeah, and 1,100 at that cost is...
If I'm not mistaken, this is fairly popular. It's another thing to do in our town, so.
It's like the Easter egg hunt.
Yep. I don't know if we want to go through day camp. It's really not an event, but just so you could have a sense of it, we do make money. We come ahead $72,000, so we could move along if you want.
Break even-ish.
Yeah.
Concerts in the park. These concerts are at Crescent Park. So you could see we were budgeted revenue for $33.82. We came in at $49.51. Our expenses were at $4,500, and we came in under our expenses at $25.35. So we actually netted a positive of $24.16. Our concerts at the park, again, it depends on the weather. It's, even when it hasn't, the 2 that we had, it wasn't great weather on the first one, but we still had people come out. Crescent's a great spot to have a concert. It's quaint, it's smaller, the expenses are much lower. I don't have to worry about a stage, so it's a perfect little site for our smaller concerts.
And I know we talked about it, but for today, but for the benefit of the board, because we're doing the concerts, the ticketed concerts at Centennial Park, we're removing the free concerts, which cost us about 25 or 30 grand because of all the infrastructure we have to bring in.
Yes.
And we're going to beef up this so that, because it doesn't cost us to do, the costs are very minimal compared to going out to Centennial Park. I think that's a smart use of resources.
Yep. We nearly had about 600 who enjoyed these two concerts. Again, it's a little bit smaller, but to your point, it's a lot cheaper to run these concerts than at Centennial West.
Okay.
Our Labor Day concert, so here's what the mayor was just referencing. Our budgeted revenue for this event was $7,400. We came in at $6,000, and our expenses for this event are $23,000, and we came in at $24,000. The reason these expenses are higher, as you know, is we have no infrastructure out there, like we just stated. So we have to get a stage, we've got to have tents out there, porta-johns. There's just a lot more we have to do to execute that event. You'll see there was a
And if the
loss
ticketed
there.
concerts generate a need for infrastructure, that's going to help us put on some of these other concerts at
Yep.
lower cost.
So our 2019 Veterans Golf Classic overview, again, these aren't finals. We're still shoring them up, but you could see our budgeted revenue was 41, and we came in at 53,630, and our expenses were budgeted at 41, and our actual expenses, is that say 53? It doesn't feel...
The actual expenses are off because we don't have the donations. We figure out the donations afterwards. I don't think that's in there yet.
Yeah, you could see at the bottom where it has the actual is approximately 27,000. This event makes money. Again, we were kind of rushing to try and get these to you. They're not ready, but it gives you an idea.
But it was successful like last year.
Yes, it was. And again, this is draft Liberty Run overview. So our budgeted revenue here was 10 grand. We came in at 11, and the expenses were at 9,000, and we came in under our expenses at 7. So our net was 3,000, a little bit over 3,000 in the positive. This event has been going on for a really long time. We had over 300 participants, 300 runners who partook in the event. And again, the veterans are engaged in this event. This is a veterans run, and I think because of that, it has kicked up our enrollment quite a bit. Independence Day celebration. One thing that's new at this event is we did have a sponsorship from Christopher Burke. As you know, the fireworks are approximately $25,000. So this event usually is in the hole quite a bit. But because of that sponsorship, our net loss was only $7,000 compared to what it would have been. You could see our revenue was at 10. We came in at 34 because of that sponsorship. Our expenses at 42. We came in a little bit under at 41. We don't have a summary yet because we're still wrapping things up from the summer. Our lucky egg hunt. So again, this is a nice spring event. It's a tradition in Orland Park. It's been going on for a very long time. Our budgeted revenue was a little over 2,000, and we hit that exactly, and our expenses were at 25, and we came in slightly under, so our net positive, or actually our net negative, sorry, was $133. But it's a great event. We get a lot of people who come out in the spring. It's usually cold and freezing, but we have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people who come to our fields to pick up Easter eggs at this time. It's one of the first events of the year, of the new year, so we get a lot of participation.
In about 60 seconds.
And it is literally done in 60 seconds.
So, Mayor Pico, Nancy, do you think we can get all of our events to this where 1,500 people over $133 is what, 10 cents a person we're
Yeah.
enrolling? So can you do that with all the events?
Yeah, we'll work on that.
We'll have that planned by January.
You got that, team? Let's go.
Thank you.
Theater, so as we talked about, again, this isn't a special event. This event did lose 3,000, but just to kind of cover this with you, we were budgeted in revenue at 26, we came in at 19. Our expenses were at 25, and we came in slightly under at 23. Jeff Epperson from Carl Sandburg was our musical director for this event, and it was fantastic. The parents and the emails we received were overwhelming. It was a huge success. So for this event, we're really pleased at the turnout and the new direction we're taking. So this is another example of theater. We had a different director for Cinderella. We just talked about this at our committee meeting. We had such a large turnout for this, for the tryouts, that we created 2 casts for Cinderella, and you'll notice at the bottom where we walked away with a net income of a little over $6,766. We were budgeted for $6,000 in revenue. We came in at 11, and our expenses were budgeted at 6.3, and we came in at 5,000. We had 2 casts, 4 shows, and 558 tickets. We were sold out. Huge success. This isn't really a special event. It's our special recreation garage sale overview. Again, we did really great at this event. We walked away with a net income of a little over $2,000. We were budgeted in revenue at $4,008. We came in at 3. Our expenses were budgeted for $1,136. We came in at $549. I think there's a theme that you could see. We really work hard to come in under our expenses as much as we can. Okay. This is a event actually held right around the Super Bowl time, Cinderella Ball overview. So this one is an opportunity for dads and daughters to get together. Cultural Arts Center, we were budgeted in revenue for $6,775, and we came in above that at $8,030. Our expenses were at $5,900, and we came in slightly under at $5,789, which you could see we had a positive net income of $2,241.
So, Mayor Pacheco.
Trustee Dodge.
Nancy, since we've kind of moved it in a slightly different direction, I remember it when it was the daddy-daughter thing, right? You said we've gotten an increase? It looks like we're saying that we've got an increase in the event, which is good.
Yes.
We're attracting a little bit more, just a broader crowds. By repositioning it, it's doing well and growing.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Absolutely. We're looking at doing a mother and son event as well. We've gotten some feedback from parents that they'd like to do a mother-son event.
Then we going back to a father-daughter thing? Do you wind up 3 events? You can make them all break even, keep going.
Yeah, we'll work on that. Okay.
Trustee Gondrella.
So is that the second event for the mother-sons in the budget, or that's just kind of like superhero, whatever?
Ray, did we get
Is that in the budget or no?
Not yet.
Mayor Pete?
Trustee Dodge.
In the hopper.
Do we think it would be in about these kind of size numbers if we wanted to add it later on, if we think about it?
I think there's
this is not a
interest.
huge amount of money, so I'm asking if there's general receptivity to the idea, we can figure it out later.
It's something we've been talking about. There's definitely interest, so we could look into that.
We'll see during the course of it. Got it, thank you.
And we're talking about younger mother-son events, not college-age mother-son
Yes.
events? Okay, good.
Yes.
That's the fest.
All right. That's it? Okay.
Okay.
What? Oh, yes. And moving along to Civic Center. Let me find it. Civic Center. So we're doing a lot of work at Civic Center this year. I've got Cindy here if we have some questions that I'm not, that I don't have answers for. But we are replacing the sound system, the inner and outer east ADA doors, and cabinets in the kitchen area. You'll notice that in the budget for buildings, machinery and equipment, and electrical supplies. It's pretty straightforward.
So one of the peculiarities of this, the Civic Center is that as of this year, we can petition the state for it no longer to be a part of the Civic Center Authority, and where the village controls this. I think we have to look at all the options on this as to what that is. I know the state has to actually approve that. I don't know that it changes how we operate it on a day-to-day basis, but it changes the control that the village potentially has if we decide to do something or not.
Mayor Pico?
Trustee Dodge.
I certainly wouldn't mind if we went deep on that discussion at some other night, because I think we would probably have considerably more flexibility with the building and the programming itself, let alone the finances. So we've been kind of silent, we've been doing this for a number of years, waiting for this approaching date, so I wouldn't mind if we put that on a formal agenda at some point.
And just as an aside, the subsidy on the Civic Center historically is a little over 200 grand a year. However, Cindy has been doing a great job. In the last couple of years, it's only been like 38,000, so we've got that to be a lot better. We're utilizing it a lot more effectively than we did. Before that, it was dropping too. It was down to 79, 80 the couple of years before that, so we've been bringing it down over the years. But I do think it would give us a lot more flexibility with the building. So I know, George, you and I talked about it day one as something that we probably have to look at, and you have some experience with it. So I do think it's something we need to do a deep dive as a board to figure out what we want to do.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, before Nancy passes it on, so
Trustee Calandrello?
I just got a couple of questions about special events. And I haven't wrapped my head around all the special events and where we're at right now, but we used to have a lot more programming, like smaller neighborhood events like Wacky Wednesdays and movies at CPAC, movies at Centennial. They weren't big items or big events, but they were well attended. Is there flexibility throughout the year to add those, or pretty much we're going to be limited to the events we're presenting today?
Well, just to address movies at CPAC, we determined that we weren't comfortable with the safety issues with those because not all the pools have lighting. We did try and execute that, and having lifeguards with flashlights in the dark is not something I want to do. So that I wouldn't recommend. As far as Wacky Wednesdays and some of those grassroots special events, we did cut those in the previous years. We did not bring them forward tonight. I suppose if we want to make an amendment, we could put a budget together for that.
I just, since my time on the board, which hasn't been that long, we had, if my number serves me correct from memory, like 13 events that was cut since I've been around. And I know budgets are tight. I just, I'm not even going to talk about Pandemonium because I don't want Gary to yell at me, but that was a great event, 14 years building, and we cut it. And I understand. I got to figure out how to settle on these issues, programs, as we talk about a family community, how we do that, and just stress that. There's a lot of small neighborhood events that have gone away, and maybe with a little more flexibility, we could add some, but I guess I'm just projecting some mental frustration. Thank you.
I guess one of my comments would be on small neighborhood events, is we have 70 neighborhoods, so it gets pretty tough to spread that out amongst all the neighborhoods. So I think we tend to use our bigger facilities for more community-wide events. Is that fair?
I think that's fair. I think our Market at the Park has kind of evolved into a weekly community event. I mean, it's not in the community like Wacky Wednesday, but we do engage the community and families with young children with a lot of games for the kids. It's very family friendly. So in some ways I could look at that as...
No, I mean, I think all the programs we do, the Market of the Park has definitely transitioned. It's a great, everything we're doing is great. I mean, but Wacky Wednesday, I mean, as someone who went to multiple of them, was when it's good weather, I mean, it was a packed house. Mm-hmm. So in different, Eagle Ridge and stuff like that. So it wasn't like it wasn't well attended. It just, anyway, just kind of a frustration or things that have gone away since the last, since I've been here.
Any other comments on rec?
Evening. To start off, I'd like to start off at 82, first page of our area. Nancy kind of addressed it a little bit as Trustee Healy brought up the minimum wage. So we're projected to go up about $50,000 in part-time salary in 2020. That would have been considerably more. However, in 2019, we did cut our seasonal numbers and contract out the landscape of the buildings that were typically maintained in-house by seasonal staff. By eliminating some seasonal positions and a lot of material, which is included in the contract, I think we've gotten a better end result. My phone hasn't rung nearly as much as it normally does throughout the growing season about weeds. Our vendors typically at each site every 2 weeks, and I think that's been a good moving forward point. We are evaluating some of the landscape in some of the parks, but I can't pull the trigger quite on that for this year, but we're checking into it. The part-time salaries is going to be quite problematic moving forward. If you look into our budgets line by line, they start on 84. I don't know if you have specific questions or not, but I can give you some of the highlights and some of the bigger dollar amounts that may have caught your eye that weren't there in 2019. Our consulting costs have gone up $460,000 for 2020. This would include the engineering, design, and construction of Schuessler Park for 2021, which would be done in conjunction with the stormwater project that we talked about at the previous meeting. It makes sense to bundle those together. As the mayor has brought up multiple times, the residents in that area have dealt with construction for 4 or 5 years. The other big ticketed item in that account is a Centennial Park master plan. It's a very large number, $350,000. We didn't come to it lightly. Through some investigation to try and eliminate the flooding issues that we have in the marina, as well in the path system just to the west of the marina between the ice rink. Our vendor, Christopher Burke Engineering, has given me a rough number for engineering and stuff to correct, engineering and design to correct those type of issues as we flood typically 4 to 5 months a year, either on the marina side or the other side, and it affects a lot of...
The path is almost always flooded.
Correct. The number alone for that was $100,000. With the changes that are coming on board in January from Water Reclamation District as far as volume control, it makes sense to include that into a master plan, because if we do expand if the board does approve the expansion of a parking lot at the pool or any other large-scale improvements at Centennial, to bundle those all together as we mitigate wetlands. So it makes a lot of sense to tie that together, because if we do expand the lake into that flooded area, that makes up area that I would normally have to mitigate or we would have to pay for. So that's part of the reason why that number is so high. Moving down just slightly in that, into our building account, that number has gone up $470,000. As everybody is aware, John Humphrey Complex is in its initial phase of renovation. This would be phase 2, which would be the building, which is it makes a lot of sense to do it in 2020 as the complex is going to be offline a good part of the year, so that when it does come back online, everything has been renovated. This is to expand the restrooms and do some improvements to the building. Any questions on those specific items?
Mr. Mayor?
Trustee Healy?
Gary, you said that there's, and I'm not that familiar with, but there's a path that gets flooded?
Yes.
But these were engineered before.
Agreed.
And
It was built in 1993. All of us, unfortunately, we're all new here.
There's times even before the construction on 159th Street where the parking lot in the marina exceeds the boat launches and comes, the farthest I've seen, it's probably about 300 feet into the parking lot. If you go onto the other side of the boat launches, which is between the ice rink and the lake, there's a lower path system that goes down there. That floods constantly. It's still currently underwater, which becomes extremely problematic as we do a lot of nonprofit fundraising walks. In the last 3 weeks, we've had juvenile diabetes, cancer, and Alzheimer's, and it's been flooded for all 3 of those. Some of those events bring 4,000 people.
It's one of my running and walking routes because I live over there and it's flooded all the time.
It's very challenging. So by having that re-engineered and corrected, it checks a lot of boxes for us. It gives us some volume control, which is, I think it's going up 20%. If I'm not mistaken, our engineer told me earlier this week, but it's
going up a lot.
I'm sorry, what was that number? I didn't hear that.
The volume control for
20%.
Stormwater. The standards are changing January 1st. But it made sense to tie all those type of things together.
Is the lake higher than it usually was when we started?
No, I don't think it drains off as quick. It just...
The path on that...
I don't know who... I wasn't
the path
part of the
there
engineering.
is, I'm eyeballing it here, but 2 to 3 inches above the normal, the normal lake height, if that. It is literally flat. You get just we get any kind of rain, it just floods all the way across it. And it's not that hard to fix. I mean, you move it 15 feet towards the ice rink and you're up a hill and you've solved the problem. So it was poorly engineered to begin with way back in the day.
Moving over to the top of page 85, the biggest item you'll see is a kind of a change in policy and how we're moving forward. You'll see an increase in our parks maintenance account of $1.3 million. That is a combination of how we're going to be improving the parks moving forward. Instead of just renovating one or two parks, we are going to be making improvements throughout parks.
That's what we already
in the entire
approved.
system. Correct. But in case somebody wondered, that is the biggest ticket item in the line there. We're also looking to replace the Thorgard system in that same account. We've had a lot of problems with it for the last year. The vendor's not been very responsive, so we'll be switching over to another system. I believe it's called iStrike. The next account in grounds.
Hold on a second, on the lightning, that's the lightning detector system? Are we going to get rid of all the false, beautiful blue days where it goes off and we have to take kids off the fields and out of the pool?
That's the rationale, yes, sir.
Okay, good.
The account just below that, in our grounds account, I just want to point out that we're going to be removing the Humphrey Woods renovation. $80,000 is still listed there. We just didn't get a chance to pop it off before the book was printed, to combine it, per suggestions, into a one-year project versus spreading it out over 4 or 5 years.
Okay. All right.
So that will be removed.
That was one of my questions, so good.
Our tree removal cost has gone up. We're requesting an increase in that. We're having a lot larger trees that have been coming down that we can't handle in-house, so we're increasing that somewhat. Another increase you may notice a little bit further down is a fun topic everybody loves is porta-johns. With the increase in tournaments and the increase in usage, we're getting a lot of complaints and we're doing a lot more cleaning, sometimes 2 to 3 times per week in some of these units. So in an effort to keep our patrons happy that are coming to the site and spending money at the site, we're trying to provide a clean facility for their use. That's most of the bigger ticket items that are in the budget. I didn't know if anybody had any specific questions on any lines in there.
Anybody have any questions on Parks and Grounds? I think the big items we handled during the capital budget. Okay. So next.
So the next department is Development Services.
Ed Lelo's first time on the firing line.
Mr. Mayor, I know it technically falls under rec. Did anybody have any questions on CPAC? As far as...
Not that I'm aware of.
Mechanicals, I didn't know if you guys had any. Okay.
I think, again, most of that was under the capital budget.
It's got to hold water.
What was that?
It's got to hold water.
By the way, those signs over there seem to have been working. I don't see people parking on the grass. So the signs have been helping. Yeah, that seems to have stopped the problem. For those of you who don't know, is that when the pool's not operating and there's softball games or tournaments or whatever, and there's plenty of room on the asphalt parking, people were still parking on the grass. So we had those signs put up, and that seems to have stopped that problem. You've got, 250 spots in the asphalt parking lot, and you've got 200 cars in the grass. So it was a pretty simple fix that seems to have solved the problem. And the grass actually looks pretty good, surprisingly.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Development Services budget can be found on page 31 to 38. It outlines a total budget of just over $3 million, covering our administration, front office staff, our building inspectors and code enforcement, planning division, as well as transportation and engineering. Generally, we saw a reduction from the fiscal year 2019, and a lot of that can be attributed to the reduction of 2 full-time positions in a full-time electrical inspector that was reduced to a part-time position, as well as a full-time senior planner that was reduced to a part-time position. Both of those positions utilizing the early retirement. In addition, in our planning division, we replaced 3 senior planners and 1 planner 1 with 2 senior planners and 2 planner 1 positions. So as we continue to address staffing issues amongst the department, we have seen a reduction in some cost savings associated with that. I don't know if there's any particular questions of any of the line items, but we did see a reduction generally across the divisions as you look at it.
Yeah, so Ed, and this is not being thrown at you, so I'm going to ask Anne Marie to answer this because before you got here, but if you look at the 2017 full-time salary and then the 2020 full-time salary, salaries have gone up, and in 2017 to 2018, we cut positions. So I guess my question is, what the heck happened? Because it looks like we've got another position and a half based on the numbers here.
Yeah, so we did talk about that, was that yesterday?
Right,
I believe? Yeah, I have not been able to dive into exactly what's going on. We need to do like a position-by-position comparison, but we will definitely work on that in the next couple days and have that answer for you.
Yeah, just so everyone, if you look at these numbers, you'll see that, for example, your administrative division, 2017 or 2018 actuals to 2020, it's up 200 grand. Now there is an offset of about 200 grand in the developments in the building division, so maybe it's positions, but then you add 100 grand in the planning division, and then you add another 80 grand or 90 grand in the engineering division. So net, you're 170 grand up. And as I recall, when we did the ERI, there was a big to-do about how we cut 2 or 3 positions out of this, and how that we've done all of this work in development services to take it down, and there was all kinds of patting on the back. Well, where did those positions go? Because it seems like they've come back in spades. And again, you just took over 2 weeks ago, so you don't know what the background of that is, but I think we need to know what that background is.
Yeah, there was a lot of switching of positions and kind of re-looking at the way they were going to fill their open positions, as well as ones that retired outside of the ERI or left outside of the ERI. But we will definitely have that for you. We just haven't had a chance to get to it.
And I know we've been going through a lot of transition up there, and we were shorthanded a lot, and then we've added some help and all that kind of stuff, but I think it really deserves a deep dive here to figure out what's going on, because the ERI and the savings that we projected don't work if we backfill all the positions and add one.
Yep, we will figure it out.
Does anybody have any qualms with them looking at that in more detail and bringing that back to us?
Makes sense.
Okay, so please do that.
Mr. Mayor?
Trustee Calandrello.
I know that, and kind of piggybacking off the mayor's comments about there's a lot of transition, and I know we hired a consultant to help facilitate some things.
Yes.
And I'm looking at consulting services, and it was 102 in 19 for the administrative division. Is that where the consultant was? Because now it's a 0 for next year. Where, I guess, we're using them now, or we're using them next year too, or no? We're done backfilling or pushing, getting things through the system?
Certainly, yeah, that's what we're evaluating, how they've helped us, and they have assisted us, and they were only scheduled to be here for a short time to get basically back on our feet, but as we've rehired staff, I think that's something that we can handle in-house once they're up to speed. What was difficult is that we did rehire some positions, but there's always a learning curve in terms of training them to understand our processes and everything else. So they were able to help us pick up some of the slack, but moving forward, I don't anticipate that will be an issue.
Right, that's how it looks like it, and I was making sure I'm reading it right, that we got past that.
And I asked that question in an individual meeting, and that was what that money is. It was the consultants that we hired to get us back on track. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions on dev services? And I just want to comment for the whole board. Ed, what are you, just starting week 3?
Just about, yep.
Yeah.
Not here, I've been there for quite some time.
But week 3 in this role, Ed's been doing a hell of a job getting a lot of things straightened away up there, and I think, so pat on the back to you for all that I've noticed, and I think, George, you've only been here 2 days, so you haven't noticed it, but I think Greg has seen it substantially. I think so have our developers, so we really appreciate it. I know you've got a busy week this week because you're 2 days downtown the next 2 days, so.
Correct, but I get to sell Orland Park, so that's the best part, right?
Yeah, I'll be there with you tomorrow.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so that's all the departmental presentations for tonight. So then we just have the personnel requests as well as the discretionary requests that were submitted by the departments that we just covered. So it's kind of short. The ones that are in bold, so what we usually do with the discretionary and personnel is we compile the list of all of the requests from the various departments, and we give them to the village manager's office, and the village manager talks to the different department directors and talks through the items, and then prioritizes them as either, yes, include them in the proposed 2020 budget, or no. So those items that are highlighted, or I should say bolded, are the ones that the village manager recommended that we include in the 2020 budget. If they're not bolded, he made the recommendation that we don't. So we can kind of walk through these if you want, or if you just have any questions in general. I know you have these lists of items along with the backup provided.
I guess what I would do is, as we go through each page, is I would just ask the board to ask the questions about either the ones that they think should be included that aren't. So those would be the ones that are not bolded, or the bold ones that are included, and do you have questions about those as to why, or concerns about that? So that's kind of how I would do it, page by page, as we go through the slides. Does that?
I think there's only 2 slides, but
Okay,
yep.
perfect. So on this page, do we have any questions or comments?
Mr. Mayor?
Trustee Calandrella?
I just want to know, I know the Assistant Recreation Director, that's been something that's been talked about. It was not recommended, so I just want to talk about, do we have a chart of rec department? Because I know that the rec department now has, 3 more entities that report to it, and I just wanted to see kind of where our thought process was. I know, I'm not sure who can answer that now since we have a change. I don't know if you can just pass the blame to the old village manager, but just kind of what the thought process was, because I'm a little concerned about workload over there. Sorry, Tom, you know I had to work today, huh?
Didn't have to. First of all, I think there is a need for a full-time assistant recreation for many of the reasons brought up. I just couldn't see making the jump in salary from to that high. It's based on the dollars available for this budget. I just didn't see the dollars there. However, I have been working with Nancy to see if there's a way we could do it in baby steps. There are people in the department that are already doing that can do the job, and are already doing pushing what an assistant director would do. So we're kind of reviewing to see if there's something we can bring forward that makes a little more sense financially and keep it within the budget. We're not quite there yet, but before we're done with the budget process, I hope it's something we can bring forward.
So you're working on a restructuring of the personnel we currently have to fill the need?
Correct.
Okay. All right.
Thanks, Tom.
Any other questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman?
Trustee Fenton?
2 comments. One with that, so if you're restructuring, are you including new dollars for that restructuring also?
I hope to be able to do it within dollars that are currently in the budget. So no, I'm hoping not to ask for new dollars to do it with dollars.
Okay, and then my other comment would be the fact that we're jumping to 2 concerts when we lost $102,000 on the first one. Granted, we only had a limited number of amount of time to do it. Just wondering why we're going to 2 instead of just trying 1 again.
The recommendation, the direction I thought from the board is that this year we're looking to do it for gap 3. And basically the recommendation is based on what I've heard from the board. So, 2 of them put in the budget with the potential of adding a third contract from the board. So it's really the board of trustees to decide how we want to do it.
I don't remember my opinion being asked about it, so I'll give my opinion now. I mean, we lost $102,000, so that could have been an assistant recreation director. I don't know, I think we should just try one again, and there again, that's my opinion.
Mr. Mayor?
Trustee Healy.
Tom, when does that decision of going from 2 to 3, when is the best time to make that? The sooner the better, or is it by the year end, or?
Absolutely, the sooner the better. One of the lessons we learned is that if we had more time, we probably could have been more effective. Probably still would have lost money, but maybe we would have cut the losses. I think to be effective in 2020 in terms of having successful concerts, we need to give the recreation team as much time as possible to put the plan together. And also in very direct, fitting direction in terms of whether it's going to do it.
Is there, as a follow-up, when you have 3 concerts, do you get discounts on equipment rentals that instead of having 1, you're going to do 3, the stage and all that?
I don't think that is concept are maybe it gets some economy of scale, but I don't believe, definitely I'd ask those questions initially, but until they've got a plan in place, it's kind of hard to determine what it should say.
I think based on the discussions that we've had about 3 concerts is where it potentially offers some savings, is there may be some things that we're renting now that if we're going to do these concerts regularly, we can purchase, and we can probably do it cheaper than the rentals are going to cost if we're doing 3. I think additionally, as we talked about earlier, I think it gives us a lot of marketing opportunities to sell more tickets, to generate more revenue, which obviously reduces any losses that we have. I think we have a lot more opportunity. If you do 1, you have none of those cross-marketing opportunities at all. So that's kind of where the opportunities are. I think it's critical, based on what I know from the agencies that book this talent, is that we need to, make a call, relatively quickly. We can probably come to the board with both a 2 and a 3 option, but we'd probably have to make that decision at that point. Is that accurate, Nancy? And then we'll know what the cost of those, what the cost of that talent is for those concerts.
Mayor Pico?
Trustee Dodge.
I think the challenge with this is just broadly our business model. I think everybody's touched on the key points. There's some other lessons learned about how we pick what acts and when and the entirety of the process. And I think the efficiencies will come in when we if we do this again, and I think we've all got to be prepared to have more losses because we're still learning, but at some point, I think the only way to make this viable is if we really iron out the business model where we minimize the staff footprint. We have other folks involved in helping us find the talent, and we start having more of our own equipment as opposed to going to the rental market all the time. So we've got a business model challenge as much as anything. In terms of the budget, I don't mind the idea of doing 2. I think we need to have this conversation at the committee level pretty soon to get into the brass tacks and bring it back to the full board. Because I think we have to be prepared that if we put $300,000 into the budget, for example, that we could lose a fair bit of money. That's just, we have to, do we or do we not like taking that risk?
Yeah, I think that's the question we have to ask, and I'm just going to bring back the history here of the Civic Center has been subsidized at an average of $219,000 a year since we had it. It's not like we haven't subsidized things in the past, and that Taste of Orland up until recently was subsidized almost $100,000 a year. So it takes some time to get these things off the ground, and if we don't take obviously we want this to be as financially successful as possible, but if we don't take the step to do them, then they'll never be financially successful, because you're not going to get them financially successful if you don't do them year after year. I think that much we found out from all of our special events, correct? If we do them year after year, people come to expect it, and then they automatically just start purchasing. And of course, we've got 1,700 people, but probably 1,680 of them are going to say it was a great event, and they're going to spread the word.
So I don't know if we want to...
Okay, so I just want to kind of step in on this a little bit. So these items here, they are not actually included in the budget right now, so they're not in the book
So
that you have in front of you.
you need an approval.
Right, so they're not in the numbers that we presented to you. So we need to make sure that regardless of 2 or 3 concerts, that when we add these amounts and we look at the revenue there we're going to add to offset it, we need to be a little bit conservative and probably not budget the full however many tickets we're going to sell.
Right.
And then when we do that, obviously, we're going to be budgeting a net loss. We just need to make sure that we actually have the funds to cover that, to stay at the fund balances we need to stay at. So if the board could make that decision, it would help us go back and kind of crunch the numbers and make sure that what we put in the budget for spending and revenue, we can actually cover and stay within our fund balance policy.
Well, I guess
And it doesn't-
I'll put it to the board on the concerts. For me, I'm willing to consider 2 or 3 depending on what the acts are and what the costs are on that. But I think 1 is the wrong amount because I don't think we can do any cross-marketing. I think it actually costs us in the long run to go that path. So I'll just start with Trustee Fenton. Well, Trustee Fenton's position is, I think, no, but I'll start with her.
Well, I guess my question would be, you just brought up the point, where are we going to get the money from if we lose?
Yeah, so if you...
There again, I agree with everyone. The more you do it, the more option you have of possibly getting more people to come. I think the fact that we're taking away free events and we're going to paid events.
We're not taking away free events. We're putting those free events back over to Crescent Park. So we're just going to a place that's, instead of costing us 25 grand, as you saw, those concerts cost us very little because we have the infrastructure there.
So where are you going to get the money for the if there is a shortfall?
Yeah, so if you remember at the last board meeting when we presented the entire budget, we talked about the excess funds that we have available to fund our discretionary requests that were submitted by the departments. So we would be using those excess funds, but with what's here on the list as proposed, as well as we got another page there, as well as some other items that have come up that we need to put into the budget that are not already in the book. We just need to make sure that it all fits within that amount that we actually have available. And we just need to kind of...
Well, you're not going to know that until we approve it and you run through all of that, correct?
Right, but it would give us a head start, especially because this is such a big
understood,
ticket
but we have to
item.
approve it so that you can come back with that.
Yes,
But my understanding is the village manager went through that and approved it to try to stay within those numbers, correct? So the numbers that are in bold, based on the numbers that you had, would keep us inside of what the number you were working from, inside the discretionary amount you had to work with, correct?
Yes.
I know there's potentially changes.
Right, with one caveat, that is 100% of the revenue, and I wouldn't be comfortable budgeting
Okay.
for 100% of it.
Understood.
So we would
Okay.
just have to kind of smooth it out.
So Trustee Fenton, concerts?
I have no problem with the CPAC electrical supplies at 7,000. As far as the concerts, I don't know, I'm just worried about the loss. If we lost 100,000 on one, are we going to lose 300,000 on two? I don't know. The village manager's recommending 300,000 instead of 362.
I'll come back to you then.
Just do one.
One, okay. Trustee Calandrello.
I'm okay with 2. I would just maybe want to refine realistic expectations. I mean, if it's 5,000 tickets at 30, if that's realistic, whatever the realistic numbers are. I'm fine with 2. We should build it up. Just want to make sure we know what we're going to eat in cost.
Trustee Healy.
I believe we have a great infrastructure there with that park. It's a great park for concerts and for getting people together. I would not mind 2, at least 2, but I'll go with 3.
Trustee Dodge.
Let's budget for 2, let's try for 3. See how the economic model works.
Trustee Katsinas.
I would be in favor of 2, possibly 3, considering how many people that went to the one concert based on their reaction. I think everyone that went there is going to tell just about everybody you're not going to make 100% satisfaction, but it was an overwhelming success.
Trustee Malani.
I'd go for 2 concerts with the possibility of 3, and, basically what Trustee Katsinas just said, I agree with that as well. There were so many people I talked to that, they didn't have an expectation. They didn't know what to expect when they went to the concert the first time. And we did have a short time to market it. So I think having a better plan in place, being able to market more efficiently, and I think people are going to go talk to their friends about what they enjoyed about the concert, that I think we'll be able to bring more people in, so.
So I think what you're hearing here, I mean, I don't disagree for sure, too. I'd be willing to go for 3 if we have the right acts in place, and I think we have many more acts to choose from now than we had in May, where we had very few to choose from that would have, brought anybody. So I think you're hearing from the board that for sure 2, and then consider a 3rd. So see what that would look like and see what the acts would be when that time comes.
I have one question on the prior page, Mayor Peacock. So, Nancy, right, with the issue with the electrical supplies versus the sound system, a little bit of background on that one? I'm sorry, Gary, excuse me.
Let me just go down in order for you. The sound system, that dollar amount has been recommended to me by building maintenance who maintains the system. It's the original system. Parts have been replaced over the 20-plus years, but he's worried about failure of the unit. So that's why we requested $5,000 to replace the unit. That's where they announce all of their safety breaks and any public announcements that need to be made within the equipment.
I mean, is it your sense that we need the thing as opposed to waiting for the mid-cycle fail and then we have another emergency thing?
Well, I guess if that's the case, then my question would be, why wasn't it in part of the capital budget? Why is it part of the discretionary budget?
It's for $5,000.
Right. If it's failing, why is it here?
Because it's not a capital item. It's just a small piece of equipment.
Well, I'm going to go out on a limb and advocate for the $5,000 if we think it's important.
I would concur. Anybody else disagree? Okay.
Well, I mentioned so the electrical supplies. This year we spent close to $6,000 replacing parts of electrical panels that have failed, that have to be custom built because they're so old. I'm funded for $500 in electrical supplies right now, and that's not going to cut it throughout the year. The complex is aging.
I guess going forward, where I'm going to be with this is to budget $500 for something that you know you're going to spend $6,000, and let's face it, if an electrical parts fails, we're going to go get it and we're going to go fix it. Same thing with restroom replacement parts. We're not going to leave the restroom broken. So we should include that in our budget to begin with and figure out where else we need to, if we need to get to a number, where else we have to make those changes. We can't, the stuff that we know is going to happen is not a discretionary item. Does anyone disagree with that? No. If we know what's going to happen, it's not discretionary.
I'm in for the $17,000.
I'm in for the $17,000, but I think in the broader discussion of budgeting is that discretionary is discretionary. The concerts were discretionary.
Right.
The changing our structure of people is discretionary. Replacement parts for things that we're going to have to replace and we're going to have to pay for is not a discretionary item, it's a budget item. And if you have to save $15,000 somewhere else, you need to look at where that $15,000 has to come from, but it's not going to be something that you have to fix. Anybody disagree?
No, Mayor Peacock, I think someone should write this down. You and I agree.
We've agreed a lot tonight.
Wait, this just moved.
So I think going forward, and I know this is a little bit of a challenge, it's the first time Tom's through the process, and he's not, a lifetime village manager, and he's stepped up and done a great job, and George, you've been here for 2 days, so I get it. But just the mindset going forward has to be, these kind of items aren't discretionary, they're required. And if you need to find $17,000 somewhere else in your budget, find $17,000 somewhere else in your budget, but not not fixing a restroom, because you know damn well you're going to have to fix it. Okay.
Mr. Mayor?
1-800 call the mayor.
Yeah, just the calls I want to get. I do get those, by the way.
I just want to go on record, I'm support fixing the restrooms.
Okay, good. I think we all do.
Okay.
All right, great.
Thanks.
And especially at the pool.
Yes.
Because the other options aren't real pretty.
Yes.
The blue dye.
So the middle one under PIO is the one that we're going to take off. That's a duplicate of the $60,000 that we already discussed.
So we just found 31.
There you go. Happy bathrooms.
So all of these are recommended for inclusion.
So I have a question on the annual report. Why do we mail that out? Why isn't that online like everything else?
Mayor Peake, I can give you some sense. There's a fair number. There's a fair number of people in Orland Park who still prefer, the communication being mailed to them. And I think when we've looked at this, every time we've looked at this, it's cheaper actually to hit all 22,000 households with some method of distribution than try and selectively mail. I mean, we're in a transition period with printed versus digital.
So if it's all 22,000 households, I'm just spitballing this, if it's all 22,000 households, can we do it like through the Prairie or something like that, where they can throw it as a booklet insert? It'd be a heck of a lot cheaper.
What does this include?
No, I know, this is the annual report, it's $7,500 for mailing and postage for the annual report. What I'm saying is that you may be able to distribute it through the Prairie much more effectively, because they go to the mail house anyway, so I don't know what it would cost for something that big, but you can find out.
Go ahead. I think that what we're saying is that this is the extra postage that we get charged to do that, so that it can be distributed by the Prairie.
Do we distribute it? We don't distribute it by the Prairie right now, we mail it.
Actually, we just met with Prairie. They were looking to come back and partner with us.
Okay. I was throwing it out there as an idea because I think it's less expensive than this, was my point.
We used to do that, and we stopped doing that because we identified several years ago that they didn't need any help. So we had to stop. Now, they come back to us and said they hired somebody who actually manages each household account, and that they're going to be able to.
Okay. I guess, Mayor Peake, to me, it's not a huge amount of money in the grand scheme of things. I think there's a fair number of our residents who want to see this, but it's probably also time for us to kind of take a more comprehensive look at just communications broadly, right? Digital and printed. So I'd love to see some dollars left in the budget, and then we kind of figure out how we want to do this going forward. Whether it's through the Prairie, whether it's rethinking the design.
Yeah, I'm fine with leaving the money in the budget. I'm just saying, let's look at some alternatives, because I think there are some potential bulk alternatives that might be less expensive for us. Any other questions on this page, discretionary?
Mayor Pico.
Trustee Katsinas.
I had a question for Ed.
Yes.
Do you feel there's a need for any added inspectors, even on a part-time basis? I think you may have talked to Chief McCarthy about that. Hiring for, what's it?
Property maintenance.
Yes, property maintenance inspectors, because it seems to be an issue that leads to other issues that, it's easily solved if we have the right number of inspectors.
Sure. I guess at this point, I think with having our full-time and our recently retired senior property maintenance as part-time, they've been able to handle the workload that we have from a property maintenance side.
I'm sorry, they have or have not?
They have.
They have.
They have.
Okay.
Especially because she's serving as more of a training role at this point, until he really can, I guess, go through what our standard procedures are and everything else, and then once he's more seasoned, it may be an opportunity to increase to a full-time position, but at this point, I think we're handling the property maintenance workload currently.
Okay.
And I think broadly, Trustee Katsinas, that's what we talked about during the development services portion, is that we need to investigate that the entire operation to see where we're at from a staffing level, because the staffing has changed significantly from what we've seen in the past, based on the numbers and the salaries. So, and I think that'd be part of and that would be part of the comprehensive look, is not just how many positions, but it's where the position is located.
And Mr. Mayor, too, the other thing I think we need to make sure that we have are, I would say that property maintenance is a core service, but because we've lost so many areas in terms of plan review inspections and in our planning side, we want to make sure that we're making sure the development projects are getting through the process as well. So when we do that evaluation, we can definitely comment to see if there's issues in adding additional property maintenance as well.
I'm just thinking of with the rental housing, the mandated once every 3-year inspection.
Right.
Certainly had to add to the workload as well.
And in past years, we've utilized part-time inspectors on those triannual years in order to help accommodate the heavy inspection years.
But you feel you have the adequate manpower to do that right now?
That's something that I'll be evaluating, but yes, I do.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Mr. Mayor?
Trustee Calendro.
Can you, and I talked about this, can you just walk me through what exactly the village video production will be and the consulting? Because, and so that 48K, that's different than the 60 that was in the non-discretionary, correct?
48K is gone.
The 48.
It was a duplicate.
That's a duplicate.
Okay,
Right. And then we're
good.
changing what was in the actual budget to 48,000 as opposed to
Correct.
the 60.
Okay, so then just walk me through what's the village video production gonna get us?
That's what we spoke to earlier.
We had talked about updating the village video. The one that's currently out there is dated and needs to be updated. So it's time, we've sat down, Abia and I have sat down with the mayor to talk it through, and we're currently investigating some options with vendors to get some pricing, but it needs to be updated.
We were doing 2 or 3 videos.
We talked about doing 2 or 3, some vignettes, and then a broader video, so it's in development, but it needs to be addressed. They're old.
The video's very dated. I've used it on some things, and it's beautiful. It was very well done, but a lot of the things that are in there are quite old. So some of it will be reused, I'm sure, but some of it...
They're from 2013 and 14 to be adjusted,
Okay.
so they're...
7 years old.
Mayor Pico.
Trustee Dodge.
So, on these kind of numbers, I mean, they're not going to break the proverbial bank. I think we'll have to figure out there's a difference between a budget and the authority to go ahead and spend. Do you have all the staffing that you need for the marketing that we want to do? Do we have what we need in PIO and communications?
We're balancing that. Nadia spends a lot of time during the day, and she covers a lot of departments. She does not wacky,
That was good.
for example, and, sometimes for that, she doesn't work with she receives it from the police department, and sometimes it's at 5 o'clock. So at 5, she's going to go home and work on it to get it out. So there's
I guess, do you have sufficient supply given the demand? Is the question? We have this question across the entire village, so this is just one department.
Yeah, I mean, she's really been used to the one-person show, so in my management style, I hate to leave things one body, because if she's out or she's sick, what are you going to do? There's challenges with that. So we're at where we're at, so I think the board decided
Mayor Peacock broadly, I mean, if we're trying to get the messaging, we're going to have to make this decision. I mean, I don't know if it's a whole lot of money either way. We still got to manage the dollars overall. I mean, all the caveats apply here, but if we're having these issues with these departmental, we've had this issue all the time. Demand always exceeds supply. So how do we manage to it, and what are the priorities? It's what a budget document is.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the reasons why we have the public relations consultants there, is to help some of the higher level things, and I know we've had a few of them in the last few weeks, that allows BIA to stay focused on some of the more, the day-to-day marketing that is, I would say, more up your power alley than some of those other things as they come down. And I think that's one of the reasons why we're going to, outsourcing for video production. We're not doing really anything in-house. We're kind of, farming that out other than the direction we want to go. So I think that's part of the reason why we're doing that.
Yeah, I guess, Mayor Peacock, broadly, these numbers don't bother me. I guess we'll have to figure out how to continue to refine this business model, right? Just as we try to get all the work done, where do we have the staffing focused on what tasks?
Mr. Chairman,
Trustee Fenton.
has staff looked into what it would cost to put a part-time person in PIO?
Yeah, so if you look at the discretionary, or at the personnel list that was provided to you last week when we gave you the budget book, it provided all of the discretionary and personnel requests. So there was a request on there for a part-time communications specialist in the PIO department. These are just the ones that were recommended by the village manager for these departments. So that one was not, so it's not on that list. but it's 16,131 is what was costed for it.
And I guess my position on this is knowing that we've made some structural and organization changes to try and address these issues, to try and get them to be more efficient. I think we need to let those play out a little bit. I'm not opposed to, George, if, 4 or 5 months from now you go, hey, we just can't handle the workload, then come back to us and ask. But I think to make the decision shortly after we make the changes, I think is probably a little bit quick on the trigger. Same thing with, our early retirement that we've done. We've got to let these positions play out. Obviously, I think we found that, in one department, we cut 75% of the staff. We obviously had to address that right away because it was a critical need. But I think in other departments, we have to let some of those things play out to see how we handle it without those positions. That was the plan all along, and to see if we can restructure. So that's just part of the growing pains. But I think we're all open once you've gone through the growing pains and you've looked at it and said, hey, maybe there's a different way to address it. I think we're all open to listening and hearing what you have to say.
Mayor Peak, on that point, I would agree. I just, if it turns out we can't find efficiency elsewhere, and after your third day, I think we'll put pressure on you to start finding more efficiency. When we come back mid-cycle, it'll be a budget amendment. It'll be some kind of adjustment, or we'll have to move funds from dollars from Fund A to Fund B to kind of get these things done. I think that's a healthy conversation because the budget is really a framework. It's not the authority to spend just yet.
And to put that in perspective, Development Services went through an awful lot over a 3 or 4 month period, and we talked about it we talked about it with the then interim director about augmenting it with some outside staff, and received, no, we don't need that. And then after a couple more months, I think the decision was made, yeah, you do need that because it's just the backlog's getting too great. And so at that point, the call was made, and we put consulting services of $102,000 in there. So I think what we're saying is we're open to hearing it. We know we're going through a lot of change. We know we're going through a lot of organizational change. It's part of the ERI, part of a lot of new directors. There'll be even more over the next year. I think the board is letting you know that don't hesitate to come to us with a plan if you feel it's needed.
Mr. Mayor?
Trustee Healy?
I hope it's not too late. I thought we were going to, that open lands was under development. Can I make some comments about open lands?
Sure.
Is that tonight, or?
Yeah, it was on the same slide as Development Services.
I'm just, correct me if I'm just not very good at memorizing these things, but open lands was started with $20 million bond fund.
So there was a referendum that was passed that gave the village the authority to issue up to $20 million worth of general obligation bonds to buy open space. So we didn't issue it all at once. It was issued probably over a 10 to 12 year period.
But when did that start?
2002, I want to say, was 2001, 2002 maybe was the referendum.
Okay, 2002. So we've taken the 20 million, and this was I thought it was to not only to purchase the land, but to maintain it afterwards. And there's no money left to maintain it now. We spent all the money on getting land, and
I think Kathy has some.
Well, let me just complete my thoughts. So I'm just wondering why. So we've purchased the land, and there's no money left. The accountant in me says, why is there a separate fund? Can't we just, there's a nonprofit over here that can raise money and buy more land if they choose, and we can always contribute to it. But, why keep it a separate fund? There's legal and accounting bills that we
so right now it has to be a separate fund because it's a 501c3. So we have to report on it separately. If that 501c3 was dissolved, because the Open Lands Foundation and Corporation were dissolved, then we would not have it as a separate fund. The land that we own is just reported as general fixed assets, but we have to keep it as a separate fund right now because of the 501c3 status.
And it's costing us, right now we have a budget of $129,000, and I just don't know why we're spending the money.
Yeah, so 100 of that is to do improvements at the Stellwagen Farm, and then the remainder of it is the operating costs of open lands.
Are we getting any funds from the 501c3?
We get some fundraising, we get contributions through people's water bills. Cell tower lease revenue is, some of it goes to open lands. So there is, we can look at the revenue listing, but there is some revenue going into that fund.
So the question is that like the cell tower, it would still come to the village if it didn't go to open lands, correct?
Yes, the village gives it to open lands.
Correct. So I think what Trustee Healy's asking is what revenues come to open lands that are contributed by the village?
I'm just kind of looking
And
at it.
I guess the follow-on question to that is the village could always take those donations as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Okay, and it'd still be
Unless
tax
they're
deductible.
specifically contributed to the open lands, not
No,
for
but what I'm saying, someone can
501c3.
donate something to us
Oh, yeah,
in that, and
absolutely.
it's still tax deductible.
Yeah, so the
it doesn't
revenue
change
for
that.
open lands is gifts and donations. We've got $2,100, so those are probably the miscellaneous donations that come in throughout the year. $3,000 for the Stellwagen Foundation, $10,000 from the leases, and then the remainder, the $29,000, is actually a subsidy from the general fund to cover just their general operating costs. I think we cover electricity at the Boley Farm, we cover their audit fees, we cover any bank service charges that there would be, just kind of the general operating costs. But there is very limited revenue coming into that fund.
So historically, because I've looked at this in the past for other reasons, the open lands was created for two reasons. One was for acquisition, and the other was for stewardship. To Trustee Healy's point, it doesn't appear that there's been that most of the stewardship's been about development as opposed to actual ongoing stewardship. And that seems to have fallen on Parks and Grounds primarily, is that correct?
The outside portion, just the building.
And that's okay, but I guess the question I would have is this, I mean, they've done a great job acquiring the lands and doing what was asked to of that $20 million. Does it make sense to have this additional layer of government oversight that costs us, even though it's, $15,000 or whatever it is? Does it make sense to have it if it's not really, doesn't
Yeah,
impact the
and
operation?
George, maybe you can comment on this too. I haven't actually gone through the dissolution of a 501c3. I'm not sure exactly what we have to do.
Well, as long as the 501...
It's on, I think. Yeah.
It's his third day.
So the 501(c)(3) is not part of the village. I mean, it's still separate from the village. So having it as a separate, just having maybe a clean break would make sense at this point if they've accomplished what they had set out to do originally. So it doesn't have to be in a separate fund. If we're not really, and if revenue does come in the future, it could be accounted for in the budget for under parks. So the village is not responsible for the 501(c)(3). I mean, it's a separate not-for-profit.
And if we received funds, and I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this because we receive it, for example, for bulletproof vests. If someone donates specifically, it earmarks it for a specific issue or specific piece of open lands or whatever that happens to be, or donates a piece of land to us, they can still do that, they can still designate it, they can still earmark it, and we're required to do that. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct. And in my past world, that's exactly what we emphasized donations, and we had a process for when they donated, how the community gave them the paperwork that they needed for their tax exempt. As a municipality, we're not a 501(c)(3). We're a municipal not-for-profit, separate tax code, but they still get the tax breaks because of that.
Mr. Mayor?
Trustee Healy?
I'd just like to add that I think the prior boards had wisdom when they set this thing up. I like the open lands, that there's no more money left. When this was set up, the growth of Orland was right in front of us. Everything was on the way up, and sales and everything, but revenues peaked in the last period, in this period, and I don't see us doing $20 more million of open lands right now. I mean, maybe if the economy goes, bazonkers, there'll be extra money or in sales tax and other things, but
I don't see the residents of Orland Park voting for $20 million again. It's not 1980 or excuse me, 2002. It's a different time.
Yeah, Mayor Precon.
Trustee Dodge.
So Yeah, I mean, I think broadly, most people in Orland Park are appreciative of the fact that we took that many acres out of production because they would have been asphalt shingled roofs. And I think at the time, the theory was people would be relatively more reticent to give directly to a municipality than to a 503, right? And so, but, okay, guess what? We're here now. The 20 million's been spent on land. We've got some interesting assets. If the question is, how do we want to execute the idea, have the separate entity or not, and then what we want to do as a policy going forward makes perfect sense to me, right? So, I mean, I don't know, Trustee Healy, the spirit of it is to bring up let's just rethink this where we are now that we have the assets. That makes perfect sense as a conversation.
I think it would be good to bring to us, what what potentially the pros and cons. I mean, off the top of my head, I don't see a lot of cons, but there probably are some. Of dissolving this and moving forward, since it's all pretty much falling on the village's lap right now, anyways, is what it looks like. And that's okay.
Yeah, excuse me, Mayor Pico. So if we got rid of the technical entity, but we're all still, and I think we are, committed to the mission and the idea that we do something with this and we defend that asset and preserve it and all those things, great. And, I don't think Stellwagen Farm is ever going to be a moneymaker, but I could see it having a positive economic throw-off in some way that's measurable.
And I think at the current time, the board makes those policies anyways. Like, for example, Boley Farm. I mean, the board's making the decision to raise one of the buildings.
Right.
So the board's still going to set the policies for those open lands regardless. It's the village's land, even though the 501c3 was involved in acquiring that. It's still the village's asset. So it's still the board's decision to make. So I don't know that it changes anything except takes a layer of cost and that we don't need anymore because they've done their job. I mean, they've done their job. They've done a great job. But I don't know that it was ever envisioned as being a 100-year board or not. I wasn't there for those discussions, but it seems like one of those things that they've done their job and now it's in the village's hands and let's move forward.
Mr. Chairman?
Trustee Fenton.
And where does the money from the revenue from the Boley Farm go?
The rent from the Boley Farm lease, that goes into the general fund, doesn't it? The Boley Farm lease? Yeah, I believe that goes into our general fund.
And then the money that goes from the rental of the growing of the crops on Stellwagen
goes into Stellwagen Foundation, so that goes into the Open Lands Fund.
Okay, so why wouldn't the Boley money go into the Open Lands Fund?
There's I gotta think this through. There's a rationale for that. I don't remember why. I think it's been done like that since day one. So I'll have to look at that. I don't know that the Boley Farm was bought with bond proceeds. I'd have to look into that. I'm not sure why.
And I guess ultimately, we'd still be leasing it. We'd still get it. So it doesn't, fundamentally, none of this changes our operation except for the oversight requirements that we have, paying auditing fees and all of those other things. It's just another
I was just wondering where the rental money went.
Yeah.
Because it's not documented anywhere.
Yeah. Like you said, it doesn't change anything.
No, it doesn't,
We
but
still own the
it's not
land. We still have to
documented.
maintain the land. I will check into that for sure. The only other thing I would comment on, and I don't know it for sure, I wasn't here when a lot of the bonds were issued, but we'd have to make sure that none of those bonds are still outstanding if they happen to have something in the bond covenants that relates to our participation in the 501c3. So that's the only other thing we'd have to kind of look at.
Well, I think that's why what we need you to come back with is, what are the pros and cons of this? Does the board agree that we should look into that?
Mayor Pease.
Seems like we have a head nod, so.
Yeah, on that question, and I guess as we go forward as a policy discussion, after we put the pavement and the Stellwagen Farm, it's an awfully popular walking trail for the neighborhoods. And then so if you not make them active recreation, because I think that has a different connotation, but you do something like that, they're very popular things for our residents. So would love to see us tune this model.
Yeah, so I think, does anybody have any more questions on that? I think in summary, we have the open lands, coming back with that, the development services, the staffing and organization of that, and understanding that versus full-time, and then the 2 versus 3 concerts, what that would look like. I think those are the 3 things that we'd like to see kind of redone over and above the other things that we approved tonight, or gave you a...
Yeah, I think development services and the concerts, I think we could actually probably get that together for Thursday and bring something forward. The open lands, that's not going to happen by Thursday, but I think the other two, we could have that together.
Well,
And maybe
I mean,
discuss it as part of
we can
Thursday.
always discuss it in December when the budget comes up, too, so make sure you get it right.
Yeah.
I'd rather have it right than have it rushed. I
those
mean,
are
2
easy.
days, so, but if you can do it, that's great.
Yeah. Okay, so that kind of ends what we had for tonight. Can you just flip to the next slide? So Thursday, those are all the departments that we'll go over. Obviously, all those departments at the end are pretty small, and they'll go pretty quick. We also have all those other funds that we just need to briefly mention to the board that we'll kind of talk through quickly. We'll also bring back, like I said, if we can bring back a couple of the questions that you had tonight, and then we'll also have the personnel and discretionary requests for each of these departments that we discuss on Thursday. After that, we will make all the modifications to the budget that are necessary. If the board feels another meeting is warranted after we're done on Thursday, we'll have that. I think it was scheduled for November 4th or something like that. We'll have that meeting. We'll come to you with kind of the final revised proposed budget, and then after that, we go through our publication process and we'll formally approve it in December.
All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Adjourned.
Yeah, okay.